I'm Jocelyn Lipton-Zoline, and my co-moderators this evening are Vito Zampini Davis and Alexa Calvo, who will be up here in a bit. They're coming from the Telluride High School Communities That Care Club, and we're so psyched to have them with us. On behalf of the Governing Council of the Progressive Women's Caucus, welcome and thank you for joining us. The PWC works to elevate women and shape our community through leadership and participation. We are an all-volunteer board who work to provide voter education. This event is being live streamed on YouTube and will be archived on the PWC YouTube page for viewing at a later date, so you can share it with people who may have missed it. Joan May is going to be our timekeeper this evening, and she will notify candidates when their time has elapsed. We want to extend a huge thank you to Tri-County Health Network for partnering with us to provide simultaneous interpretation this evening. We're really grateful to have Valentina here providing interpretation, and she's going to come up and just talk a little bit about how that works.
Would you like me to use this microphone right here?
Any of them is fine.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Valentina Estrella. I will be here to simultaneously interpret this evening. Currently, there's no one in the room, but if someone please show up, just be mindful of keeping your sentences short. If you see me pause, like raise my hand or ask you to slow down, I'll be making signals back there. So just keep an eye on me if I need any sort of repetition, clarification. But it should be a pretty easygoing evening. Just being mindful that we do have interpretation in the room. Thank you.
Thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
Way cool.
All right. We will begin this evening with presentations on the 3 local ballot measures. First, to explain measures 1A and 1B, which will appear on ballots for voters throughout the county, we are joined by County Commissioner Ann Brown. And if you come on up.
Sure.
And I've been asked to remind everybody to speak right into the microphone for the YouTube audience.
Okay, so I prepared, kind of an outline, and then to take questions as well.
We don't have prepared questions,
But if someone has a
you might
question.
come up.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay. So these are 2 ballot questions that the Board of County Commissioners has proposed for voters across the county. The first one is 1A, and that is to extend term limits for the Board of County Commissioners. So currently, county commissioners are allowed to serve 2 4-year terms, or consecutive terms, that is, or a total of 8 years. If you happen to pause, you could come back, but 2 consecutive 4-year terms. And this ballot measure, if it passes, would allow 3 consecutive 4-year terms, or a total of 12 years. So I have just a little bit of background on this. I'm not sure what happened prior to 1994, but the history that I have begins in 1994 when Amendment 17 was passed, an amendment to the Colorado Constitution, and that limited all elected officials to 2 4-year terms, or a total of 8 years. Although it did specify that local jurisdictions, the voters in those jurisdictions, could change that if they chose to. So in 1977, San Miguel County, along with quite a few other counties, voted to allow elected officials to serve more than 2 terms, i.e. no term limits in San Miguel County for elected officials. In 2015, the voters chose to reinstate 2 4-year term limits, but only for the Board of County Commissioners. There is generally perceived to be a distinction between the Board of County Commissioners and other elected officials, which are more professional positions as opposed to political positions. So obviously there are politics involved in that as well, but the idea is that to have greater continuity in those other elected positions, there are no term limits in San Miguel County. So what we're asking for at this point is to not eliminate term limits, but again, to increase them from 2 to 3 terms. And essentially, the point of this is to create what the Board of County Commissioners feels is a better balance, recognizing kind of the steep learning curve of becoming a county commissioner. I can tell you all about that, having served just a little over a year. kind of the idea that many commissioners come in with long-term goals they would like to accomplish, or they develop them as they go. And projects in government take more than, just a few years. And then also just the value of continuity and having history on the board. So that's, on the one side, an argument for having longer term limits, but at the same time, you want to provide opportunities for new candidates, new ideas, new thoughts, and leadership. So the thinking among commissioners that I've spoken to around the state is that 3-4-year terms is generally perceived to be kind of that sweet spot in between, where you're up to speed, you can really get things done, you have built relationships and understanding, and yet you're not kind of growing too long in the tooth, if you will. So there are 64 counties in Colorado. Currently, 25 have no term limits for Board of County Commissioners. 7 have 3-year terms, which is what we are suggesting. And then there are 32 who just continue to have the default set by that Amendment 17. I want to make clear this will not affect other elected officials. It will only affect the Board of County Commissioners. So we will continue to have no term limits for other county elected positions. And also just to clarify that while we are extending the term limits, obviously a commissioner would have to run and be reelected every 4 years. This is not just keeping them in office for 12 years. So that's what I have to say about 1A. Are there any questions?
I'm just wondering when it would go into effect and if it would apply to currently serving commissioners.
The way it is written, yes, it would apply to currently serving commissioners. And yep, it would. Yep.
Okay.
And for the record, I don't intend to serve 3 terms, and neither does Chris Holstrom. But again, it was just trying to find what, I have learned in my time talking to other commissioners, even outside San Miguel County, and what I think our commissioners have come to understand, that our feeling is that's kind of the sweet spot. Yeah.
Excellent.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Moving on to 1B. This is basically a reallocation of some of the mill levy that is currently allocated to our Parks and Open Space Department to housing purposes. So this is not a new tax. It is merely a reallocation of existing revenues. So the ask is, again, and this is proposed by the Board of County Commissioners for the voters' approval or denial, would be to reallocate 1/3 of the current mill levy dedicated to parks and open space to housing. So again, a little bit of history. In 2001, San Miguel County voters decided to charge ourselves 1.5 mills for the acquisition, development, maintenance, and operation of open space, parks, trails, historic preservation, and the fairgrounds. So in the first year that those mills were collected, which was 2002, it generated about $686,000. And because our assessed valuation has grown, and that's the basis on which the taxes are levied, you take the mill levy times the assessed valuation with some semi-complicated math in there that our assessor and treasurer know how to do, and you come up with the revenue. So the first year that generated $686,000. And more recently, we've been collecting well over $1 million a year, between like 1.3 and 1.8, depending on, again, the fluctuation in assessed valuation. So we've been collecting over $1 million, but spending only about $600,000 to $850,000 a year. So we've been having a surplus every year. And meanwhile, we've really accomplished quite a bit. We have the Down Valley Park, we have the Placerville Park, we have the schoolhouse down there, we run the fairgrounds, we do some cross-country grooming, we have trails throughout the county, historic markers, there are historic sites that we are refurbishing. So we're getting, I think, a lot of really good work done. And meanwhile, we have accumulated a healthy fund balance of $3.67 million. So Parks and Open Space has been in very good shape, which is not to say that they won't be dinged if we do reallocate some of their money. It will just require a little bit more prioritization and planning ahead for large capital projects. So, rather than just taking the surplus that we have each year, we'll have to, kind of bank it and plan ahead. But the feeling of the commissioners, and we'll see if the electorate agrees, is that There is sufficient funding currently for parks and open space in the county, and we really do need funding for housing, which is one of our top 3 priorities. Right now, the county only has revenues of less than $300,000 a year that are dedicated to housing. That comes from a combination of housing mitigation fees and a real estate assessment, something that happens that I can't remember if it's real estate assessment tax or real estate assessment, but anyway, small one of those. So there's a little bit of money that comes in every year, but it's really not enough to do anything significant, and certainly not enough to bond against should we want to do a larger scale project. So just the final details on this. Currently, Parks and Open Space, as I said, has 1.5 mils, and this ballot measure would take a third of that, or 0.5 mils, and dedicate that to housing, and 1 mil would stay with Parks and Open Space. So if the math works out as we expect it would, if this passes, as an example, next year, Parks and Open Space would collect $1,278,000, which is twice what they originally collected when it was first passed, and housing would get about $639,000 a year. So that's money we could actually build something with. And the county does have 3 projects on the books for planning right now. So that's why we're making this suggestion to the voters. Any questions about 1B?
Excellent. Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us.
You're so welcome, and thank you for having me.
Now we will turn our attention to ballot measure 3A, which concerns future funding for the gondola and will appear on ballots for most folks residing within the R1 school district. Joining us this evening is David Averill, Executive Director of the San Miguel Authority for Regional Transportation, or SMART. David will give us a short presentation on the ballot measure, and then we will follow up with some questions.
Great. Thanks for inviting me to be here. This is exciting. So I'm sure you've all heard of 3A, as was just described as a gondola funding measure, but I just want to correct that it's a regional transportation funding measure. There's a little bit in there for everybody, including enhanced bus service and things of that nature. But yeah, 3A is primarily geared to secure a long-term source of operations and maintenance funding for the gondola. Most people that have been around town or their area for a while know that there's a current operating agreement that expires at the end of 2027. So this is primarily to secure operating funding, picking up the responsibility for operating and maintenance January 1, 2028. The taxes would kick in next year, and we would collect those and aggregate those in 25, 26, and 27 to save up a starter fund, I guess I would call it, for the eventual rebuild of the gondola machine. I think that's always the second piece of the puzzle that most people do acknowledge, that there's a funding agreement that expires at the end of 2027. And we all know that this machine at some point needs to be replaced. And so we're actively planning for that. 3A helps move the ball on both of those. In many ways, it's critical for a first step to get any kind of federal grant funding or anything of that nature to secure the rebuild project over the long haul. So it's a combination of sales tax, lodging tax, and property tax. The total package is about $8.2 million. 7.2 of that will be reserved for gondola operations and maintenance and the capital rebuild project only. And then the remaining $1 million will go to the bus side of the house, as I like to call it, even though it's one organization, to support the expansion of SMART's regional bus services throughout the region, consistent with the strategic operating plan, which the SMART board is currently just wrapping up work on. So benefits to the folks outside of the immediate gondola usage area would be fare-free transit down Valley and Enrico. There's the last 2 parts of our district that still pay fares. More service to Rico on the weekends, potentially another round trip down there for the week or during the week, and also weekend service down Valley, and filling out the Lawson Hill schedule, which we all know has a giant gap in the middle of the day. And so those are sort of the kind of things that you would see there as far as tangible and service improvements. And then the rest of it would go to the SMART capital program needs, which is replacement buses for our growing fleet and our aging fleet, facility work, bus stop improvements, which we're really excited to start doing some improvements at some of the stops throughout the service area and things like that. I don't know what else kind of detail to go into for folks, but I'd certainly take any questions if there were any.
Thank you. We have a few follow-up questions.
Okay.
First of all, if this measure is approved, what will Telluride Ski and Golf's overall contribution be? And how long will the agreement with Telski be in place? How will the ski company's contribution change from the one that exists now in terms of total amount paid and proportion of funding for the gondola?
That's a great question. Excuse me. So currently, TSG pays approximately $200,000 or $250,000 a year to Mountain Village to help offset some of the costs of operating the gondola. The new agreement that would come to SMART would be $1.5 million annually to use towards the gondola, but also at some point, if we didn't need to use it on the gondola, we could use it to support the bus side of the house, as I mentioned. So it actually is a flexible source of funding. I think in the near term, keep our eyes on the prize. We've got this giant capital project to tackle. And so I think in the near term, it makes the most sense to use that funding towards the gondola, whether that's a bonding mechanism or direct payments for the new machine or something like that. I guess remains to be seen by the leadership, but it would not go away. It would be a permanent agreement, and it would be transferable if the ski area ever sold. So we have a couple backstops in there. If circumstances changed, that would be the way that's handled. So I think I covered that all. There's like 3 or 4 parts to that. I think I got them.
Excellent.
Hi, David. My name is Vito. I'm with Communities That Care. And I had a question of what is the Town of Mountain Village Owners Association contribution to the overall gondola replacement and operations?
Right. So TMVOA has committed up to $20 million in cash capital towards the rebuild project. So that's a big chunk of it. And that's where they're at.
Great. How does the proposed funding break down as far as contributions from locals versus funding from area visitors?
That's a great question. In general, the approach has been to try to get the visitors to pay for more of this than the locals. And so in general, I think, you look at the lodging tax, 100% of that will be absorbed by our visitors. Records show in both communities that visitors pay approximately 70% of the sales tax revenues that we see. So I think there's a disproportionate share that goes to visitors there. Property tax is a little bit tougher, right? But I think some of our voters also, or our visitors also pay property tax when they stay at commercial lodging and things like that. I assume that those costs are passed on to the visitors. I don't know for sure. I'm not in that business, but that makes sense to me. So roughly 70% of the costs, including the Telski contribution, because that would be targeted at visitors also, would amount to what we're looking for there. Excuse me.
And David, one more question for you.
Sure.
If the ballot measure is not approved by voters, what will happen next, and how will it affect our gondola operations going forward?
Well, I'm going to start looking for another job. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it is kind of a daunting thing just from a transportation planning perspective. I'm a professional transportation planner. I've been doing this 20 years. I can't imagine the impacts to the spur parking situation, that kind of thing, if that machine stops running for whatever reason. So what's next? I really don't know. If I had to guess, maybe we would try this again in a year or two, but we know we need to have something in place by the end of 2027. This actually took us a long time to get to this particular package. And as noted, we really did think about the mix of taxes quite deliberately. And I say we, I talk about our leadership committee, which was basically every elected official in the area had a say in how this was crafted and came to be. But it's an approach that addresses all the different user groups, focuses the majority of the costs on our visitors, which frankly are they're the biggest users of the system. They're about 70% of the ridership on that is our visitors as well. So I think that I'm a planner. I can see some of the future, but I don't really know what an alternative looks like if we don't get this figured out here in the real short term. It's like I said, it's very daunting. I can't imagine trying to keep pace with that demand with buses, for instance. You can run a lot of buses, but I don't think you can make up the capacity of the gondola and also save the impact on congestion and parking in Telluride, both towns really. But yeah, it's not a great situation in my opinion.
Thanks. And finally, where can voters get more information as they're getting ready to vote?
You can check out the SMART website, smarttelluride.com. It'll redirect you to a colorado.gov address, but there's an FAQ there. And then if you're interested in the campaign activities or messaging coming out of the campaign at friendsofthegondola.org, Website is up and running. They're active on all social media as well.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Do we have more than one question from the audience? Sure, go ahead.
If as a resident of the school district, I vote no because I'm pretty sick and tired of increased taxes every year. That has nothing to do with the contribution from Telco or the Mountain Village.
Actually, that contribution will be contingent on 3A passing from the ski area. Yes.
Oh.
I can't speak to what TMVOA would do with the capital contribution.
Okay, I won't comment on this. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to take a short break while we bring our county commissioner candidates up and switch out moderators. So Candy and Galena, come on up. So we're just gonna sit in a row here. I have little name tags for you guys to try to prop up in front of you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We're gonna say it's, yeah. All right. I want to welcome my co-moderator, Alexa Calvo, and welcome to our two candidates, Candy Meehan and Galena Gleason. The San Miguel Board of County Commissioners is made up of 3 members, each residing in one of the 3 districts in the county. Although commissioners come from one of 3 districts, voters in the entire county vote for each seat. And so our candidates this evening both reside in District 3, which runs from Ilium Road all the way west to the end of the county. But voters throughout the county will be voting on this race. Candy and Galena, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We will start with 1-minute introductions from each of you, beginning with Candy.
All right. Hello, my name is Candy Meehan. I moved to San Miguel County in 2012. However, I've been raised all over Colorado. My family homesteaded Loma in the 1880s, and we spent, farm ag family, set in tubes, bucking bales, understanding what it meant to be farm to table. Had the opportunity to grow and move to different parts of the United States, been all over Phoenix, New Hampshire, Maine, Oklahoma, Kansas, and the opportunity to come home. My husband is a native of Norwood. And with that, his family, between his brother, his father, and himself, have served over 80 years on the Norwood Fire Protection District. So I have firsthand knowledge and understanding of the emergency services. We do heavy civil engineering, earthwork, and construction for a living. So I understand water infrastructure, housing needs, these types of things, as we are at the general contractor right now for Newmont at Iderado, Leadville, and San Luis Valley. I bring to the table 8 years of experience on local municipality board in Norwood, and I serve at a state level, the Colorado Municipal League, on the executive committee. I'm also the Club 20 designated appointee for San Miguel County. Thank you very much.
Galena?
All right. I'm going to move this closer. I'm Galena Gleason, and I'm very honored to be speaking with you all this evening. I live on Wrights Mesa, where my husband Ryan and I have carved out a niche over the last 10 years, raising our family and caring for our land. During this time, I've served on local nonprofit boards that support regional agriculture, food security, and the success of small business owners. I currently serve on the San Miguel Planning Commission, where I have a front row seat on county policies, initiatives, and goals. This position allows me to listen to stakeholders and community members about issues that matter most to them. San Miguel County has been my home since the mid-90s, and I've lived in all 3 districts. I have been shaped by the people and landscapes that reside here. Through my lived experiences, I've observed what works and what needs to be mended. As county commissioner, I will work to find consensus and common ground so we continue to thrive. We can build resiliency by expanding housing opportunities for our workforce, strengthening our infrastructure through collaborative efforts, being stewards of the land, and giving a voice to all residents. Thanks.
Okay, you will have 2 minutes to answer each question. We ask that you speak clearly and not too fast to make Valentina's life a little easier. If you need the question repeated, please ask. As moderators, we may use our discretion to follow up on a question or ask for clarification. If we do that, each candidate will have 30 seconds to clarify themselves. Let's begin.
Yes, thank you.
How do you plan to weigh the interest of various constitutions from across the country? We will start with Galena. Yeah, how do you plan to weigh the interest of the various constituents from across the country?
The county. Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a really good one because San Miguel County is very diverse, and it's a pretty there not only are the residents diverse, but the landscape is diverse, and so is the economy. So District 3, being the largest geographic district, as Jocelyn mentioned, starts at the Ilium Valley and runs clear to the very west end of our state, actually. And there are many different livelihoods and ways of life that people encompass in my district specifically, but throughout the county, we have various economic drivers: tourism, recreation, agriculture, commerce. And I feel the best way to represent everyone's interests is through experience living here, understanding those economies and needs, and also just being willing and open to listen and learn and evolve through the job to be able to represent people's best interests. I also really believe that a commissioner should not come to any issue and have their personal ideology drive their decision-making process. It really is based on consensus and an understanding of their constituents and the economic and social and environmental needs of the county. So, I feel that I'm really well equipped to do that based on my experience living here, running businesses, raising a family, working with various nonprofit boards, and having some government experience as well.
Okay. There's so many proclivities and nuances that encompass San Miguel County. We are the 40th smallest county in the state of Colorado, and we range from the 20th to 25th most wealthy. 9,000 people, every man, woman, and child, ducks, cats, and dogs could fit at the Gaylord at one time. For me, that was pretty overwhelming when I sat there and thought about how there's so few of us truly in this big, beautiful, diverse county, but how we have income disparities and we do have issues that we need to work through. When we're talking on the East End, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in budgets. And when you get to the west side of the county, you're talking less than $1 million. And it's stepping back and trying to determine how people are doing the very best with what they have and what goals they can accomplish that is going to be sustainable and mindful. When you're talking about the west side of the county, when we're talking about a water project, let's say, you got a $11-12 million water project. It's going to take that community 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to pay off. And when it's here on this end, because of your revenue and your opportunities, it's paid off more frequently. It's just a stronger economy over here. Giving the opportunity for locals to understand the diversities of one another and where people are, I think gives us the opportunity to understand one another a lot better. We're not in the same places. We don't have to be in the same places. And areas develop differently at their own momentum. It's just making sure that we are giving space and place to those opportunities too, and that we're not leaving anybody behind.
Great, thank you. With an annual budget of about $36 million, about half of which is allocated for fixed purposes, prioritizing the county's discretionary spending is crucial. What are your top priorities for budget allocations? Candy, please begin.
Water, infrastructure, and housing. Without water and the appropriate infrastructure for delivery or sustainability, there is no housing opportunity that's long-term and stable. One of the largest things in San Miguel County, I think that we forget, is that we've been classified in a D4 drought on and off for the last 20 years, and it impacts everyone. If we're going to have a sustainable, healthy county, we have to make sure that water is there. It's something I think we all take for granted. I know that I do when I go, throw my clothes in the washer, or, get something to drink or make myself tea, but it's not something we take for granted when the toilets won't flush or these types of issues come to us. With infrastructure, as a professional background, I understand delivery, pressure treatment, these types of things, and the costs associated with these large scale projects. After COVID, materials went through the roof, and so did your construction costs, and so did mitigations from organizations like CDOT and MSHA and OSHA. So getting into that, I would absolutely, my primary focus is water. So thank you.
Okay, well, most of the county budget is spoken for by state statute, by services that we must provide. And what remains within the budget, the discretionary budget, is up to commissioner priorities. What I would first do is take a closer look and analyze how the funding is being distributed throughout the county, and identify potential opportunities to help bolster infrastructure and programs that serve District 3, particularly, given that's my district and it's my number one priority to represent my district. Looking into opportunities to create some regional reciprocity by potentially helping with the water issues that Candy's been referring to on Wrights Mesa, and bolstering water storage and delivery. I also would really hope to expand on behavioral health, early childhood development and education, emergency response services, and wildfire mitigation efforts. So any discretionary budget that might be available, that's something that I would truly prioritize for my district and throughout the county.
Thank you. What are your primary interests and how do you see yourself engaging at the local, state, and even federal levels to be effective in these areas? Galena, you first this time, please. Sorry. What are your primary interests and how do you see yourself engaging at the local, state, and even federal levels and to be effective in these areas?
Yeah, so, well, as I just mentioned, I'm definitely very interested in infrastructure improvements. I feel that that is the way we are going to be able to move forward to create more workforce housing, is by bolstering our infrastructure. On the east side of the county, we really need to put our heads and pool our resources together to work towards potentially finding a solution for a regional wastewater treatment plant. I'm glad that David Averill was here speaking about SMART and the transportation efforts, and that's something that we need to continue to work towards to improve and fund our public transportation, because that's the through line that connects us all and really stimulates our economy. And then further west, really looking into helping the water system improvements should be one of our major priorities moving forward, to even open the potentiality for future housing projects on Wrights Mesa. And in Down Valley communities, I want to continue to speak with residents there and talk about the potentials of developing a more robust on-site wastewater treatment system down Valley to give some potentiality for housing infill, and have ADUs be a possibility for Down Valley communities. I also just really think we need to continue to fund and find opportunities for early childhood development and education programs, just working towards behavioral health solutions and supporting our community that way. And then on the state level, I really feel there's opportunity to find grant funding that we could then match with budgetary opportunities within the county for wildfire mitigation and climate resiliency action.
For me, it's right back to water. Very simply stated, if we don't have adequate water storage, delivery, or accessibility, all things in life are impacted. You can't have a long-term sustainable community if you don't have water. You can't mitigate fires. You can't have whole foods. You can't, health services are impacted. Every single thing that we are doing in this county is impacted by our water sources. Our recreation is based off of the San Miguel River proportionally. The ski resort, our finances, our funding, everything basically comes back to our ability to have a sustainable, mindful water source. On a state level, we deal actually a lot with the CWCB and numerous other agencies that are excited to give us money. The Upper Colorado River Basin is a huge hot topic. I actually sit on the board of the Southwestern Basin Roundtable in addition, and along with Chris Holstrom 2 years ago, wrote a $165,000 water grant to get the 5 water organizations on Wrights Mesa to work together to do complementary engineering. Because we are land rich and money poor some of the time, if we have these 5 organizations working together, we're not engineering over the top of one another. We're doing it complementary to where we're not, going in and spending $125,000 on engineering for one organization that's not going to be able to realize their goal in 20 years. We're doing it together. With this, once this study is completed, it'll be moved on to a federal level, which is PL 566 money, which I think 20 of the watersheds in the state of Colorado are currently utilizing it. And for every $25 million of improvement, the grantors are responsible for about $7 million. And if you take a step back and take a good hard look at Wrights Mesa, about $55 million would resuscitate its entire water system, and it would stabilize housing growth. It would stabilize our schools. It would help with the EMS response services. Like most of we've been running into some fires recently. And if we didn't have the Jubilee Ranches with their pond open, that 80-acre fire that took place right across from the state land board property below the Lone Cone would have gone up in flames. Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Given that the loudest opponents often dominate discussions, how would you approach decision-making to ensure all voices and interests are heard? Candy, it's your turn to start.
It's so important that you do not try to change your thinking with your thinking. I think some of the best negotiation sometimes is 30%, 70%, but asking other people who do not think like you what their thoughts are, it gives you an opportunity to grow. That's what objections are. They're opportunities to grow. That is one thing I had the opportunity to really embrace when I had an educational, soiree, and at Harvard. It was wonderful. I was around 81 of the most intelligent people in the entire world and found out just because we're this little doesn't mean we're that different. We just have, we're just small. And having the ability to step back and see how the nation sees us, how they're seeing these problems, how other countries see us, was just imperative for my personal growth. And if I can bring diversified voices to the table so that we have both sides of the ticket talking, that's exactly what I want. I'm unaffiliated for a reason. I don't believe anyone in any one direction's got all the answers. I believe we're better together.
This is such an important question. The county's been really making some great strides in communication and transparency and just an open process for public input. And I'm really believe in that and am a proponent of improving these communications moving forward. So I believe communication is important so people know what's going on. Secondly, as an elected official, it's really important to know your constituents, know the residents, understand the broad scope of views and opinions and ways of life and economies, and be able to bring that cumulative voice forward. So having an understanding of who you're representing and being able to bring a cumulative voice is important. And a large component of that is being available and listening and getting out into the communities and interacting with people and just hearing them out and being willing to hear all the various perspectives and set your own perspective aside to be able to truly represent people. Running for this seat has been an incredibly eye-opening and beautiful experience for me because I've had the opportunity to connect with so many people that I wouldn't otherwise have, even though I've lived here for most of my life and have resided in all 3 districts over a time span of 30 years. It's just been an opportunity to open my eyes, ears, and heart to hearing people's stories, their concerns, their solutions, and really just understand our county on a more deep level. I also, sounds like that's time.
Okay, thank you. What elements of the climate action plan and the climate change plan and the resilience section of the East End master plan are your highest priority for implementation?
Yes.
Galena, you first. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I really feel that the climate resiliency action matrix that resides in the East End master plan really can carry over to all portions of the county. One of the #1 action items is water conservation, and building up our water infrastructure is a large part of that. And so I would certainly prioritize water conservation and continue to move towards efforts and policies to really engage our communities and our practices to conserve water in any way that we can. Wildfire mitigation is also a really high priority action item. And we can do this by fuel reduction projects, seeking out matching grant funding to support projects and even expand beyond what we've been doing on the county level to support local jurisdictions, private landowners, and just continue to work towards wildfire mitigation, defensible space, and thinking about bolstering our safety in regard to wildfire mitigation. The county, they increased their funding support of Western Region Wildfire Council, and that's an organization that is doing a lot of great work in our region to help mitigate wildfires and give private landowners and community groups information and tools to be able to create defensible space in the name of wildfire mitigation. And then partnering with the Forest Service and collaborating with jurisdictions to work on forestry projects. And then we can continually work to improve public transportation and work on building code updates for net zero development.
All right, thank you again. I'm going to say the word again, water. Making sure we have reliable and accessible water sources, more holding ponds across the county for just that for fire mitigation. Net zero for me though is a huge piece. We've got a lot of building coming through this county, and we are not doing our part to the point that I think we could by changing the international building codes for net zero, and basically either by retrofitting the government buildings with solar and requiring that anything built has its own contribution back, to things as simple as bringing water to the table for large scale opportunities. Like, you have some huge hotels coming up here. Are they bringing water to the table? Are they talking to you about how they're not going to be consuming, how they're going to reduce that footprint? What's it going to look like in your community? Is that establishment going to impact your daily life? For me, there are so many things that we could be doing. We need to be focusing, I think, a little harder on geothermal opportunities and clean energy opportunities. And that is such a huge topic. I apologize because I have so many things coming through my head right at the moment. It's hard to pinpoint one thing. As far as, wildfire and fire mitigation, you have a couple huge districts. The Norwood Fire Protection District has 845 square miles, 3 full-time people and 20 volunteers. And 3 of those volunteers are my direct family. So we need to see what we can do to bolster and strategically reinforce those resources. Thunderhead Trail Fire was only, I think it was less than 10 acres. And it was a cost of $750,000 because it was 14 drops of chemicals to suppress the fire. We've got a lot of undergrowth and brush. And every time we have a good water year, that means we have more fuels. So.
All right. There has been a big uptick in uranium exploration permits in the county. The planning department is currently working on drafting new land use code language regarding mineral extraction. What would you like to see in the new mining regulations? Candy, please go ahead.
Okay, so my family's been MSHA certified for over 25 years. We work in open pit mines and we do slope stabilization. So talking about mining exploration isn't something out of the box for us. The one thing that I want to see ensured is the reclamation of the site, time, place, and space. How long is it going to be there? What's the usability of it? And do they have the geotechnical reports to actually validate the claim stake and the exploration? With the Dolores National Monument Project, and there's a lot of opportunity to be respectful of what's already in place without taking away, without compromising and not protecting the Dolores National Monument. I believe that there's a ton of room for compromise there because that space is beautiful. It does need to be protected. It doesn't need to be strip mined to death. But what's that reclamation going to look like when they have an open pit mine or it's an underground mining? What does that look like in 20 years? I mean, that's where I'm concerned. Right at the moment, I think we have a pretty good handle on how we're letting these permits come through because this county is very conscientious. They're completely on top of the stormwater protection plans and things like that. But what is that going to look like in 20 years? And what are we requiring of these people doing this exploratory to commit to in bonding and these types of things to make sure that that property or that site is restored to condition?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that our region has a deep history of mining and natural resource extraction. But it's also important to it's important to recognize this and also keep an equal eye on the economic and ecological impacts. Well, my time serving on the Planning Commission, we've seen a handful of mining exploration special use permits, and I have been impressed with the regulatory process and our ability to mitigate impacts through that process. That said, we're going to be seeing a much more robust process in developing the mining regulations. What I would like to see based on the mining exploration permits that have come in front of us is, I think something that is really lacking is more in-depth studies of runoff water. There's been a couple of instances where I felt the explanations we were given for how water might run through any said mining plot wasn't always adequate to what I wanted to see. And so a more robust runoff study throughout the year to really give an idea of how the hydrology is working on the topography of the land and make sure that that is truly safe. Also impacts on wildlife, native plants, and soils. There's a lot of compaction that occurs with any of this development, whether it be small or large. So really real robust mitigation on soil compaction. Where most of these minerals reside is on really cryptobiotic, really delicate soil structures, and it's important to be really mindful of that. And so that's something that I'm going to push to see in the regulations. And certainly reclamation and bonding is a really important piece to this. And similar to what we developed in the solar regulations, there's got to be a very robust bonding requirements in the regulations. Thanks.
How do you envision the future development of the Diamond Ridge property? And what specific plans or projects would you advocate for to achieve this vision? Please focus on your forward-looking ideas rather than past issues or controversies. Galena, you first.
Yeah, we haven't been able to talk about Diamond Ridge. So, I mean, we have three options here with Diamond Ridge. Develop it, land bank it, or sell it. And currently, the property is in a kind of land banking realm right now. And I really think that what needs to happen moving forward with this particular piece of property is to engage the public in robust public input and take a pulse with our community on where people are at and the solutions that we can come up with together to move forward on this project, sell it, or save the land for potential opportunities down the road. I stepped on the Planning Commission right after the Diamond Ridge, what should we call it? Debacle? I don't know. Definitely have been hearing a lot of feedback from the community on their concerns on the way this particular project was initiated. And I think rather than looking at it as a debacle, I think we should look at it as an opportunity to improve communications and really engage with the public to make a decision cumulatively on how we move forward.
So my introduction to the Diamond Ridge project was speaking to a number of members in the community who do not feel that they have been heard since there has been no public meetings regarding this development yet. From a bystander and a spectator's point of view, it seems like there's a lot of litigious moves going back and forth with the county and the property owners, and it doesn't seem like right at the moment they're in agreement or can find common ground. It'd be my suggestion for the county or whomever at that point to take a step back, develop other properties that there's less contention and more opportunity, and that would be probably less of an investment to bring to the table. It looks like you're gonna have to bring water to the Diamond Ridge table. It looks like you're gonna have to improve sanitation and numerous other things. And right now, the constituents that are in that area do not seem to be married to the idea. They don't even seem to be comfortable quite with it. So I think given time, it's like I have to agree with Galena, either land bank it or sell it at this point in time and move on to something that can be developed immediately and that is less of a fiscal draw in legal fees.
All right. As a commissioner, you work for constituents, you work with staff and alongside other elected officials locally and at the state and even federal levels.
Mhm.
Each commissioner brings different leadership skills and style. Give us some examples of your leadership skills and style. How do you get things done? We'll start with Candy.
Well, I barely sleep, so there's that. And I make lists driving in the car that I never write down. So I'm that lady at the grocery store with 45 things to get and I leave with 3. One of the things I love to do is talk to people. My outreach and my networking is probably one of my best strengths. I like to actually have the opportunity to sit down and talk one-on-one with people and then network beyond that. And my strengths, I believe, are I'm approachable and I'm available, and I return phone calls and emails. And one of the things about me too is I've never met a stranger, and I like to be able to talk through things so that I can understand people's objections or understand their excitement about something. And that was one of the wonderful things working on the solar project with the Protect Rights Mesa group. We were able to get together with the community and have these conversations about where everybody's perspectives were, and to find out that we really truly had the same goal, and we just needed to figure out how we were going to collectively get to, a solution for us that was fitting. And that led to tons of community meetings and, lots of time with the commissioners, lots and lots of time with the commissioners, reaching out to state senators, reaching over federal lines to talk to people that have been through these things before and explain regulations and, what would benefit us and what would kind of cripple us. And for me, that's the leadership style I'd probably stay with is, adaptive, not authoritative. So.
Thanks. I would describe my leadership style as measured, inquisitive, and open. My background, although I think my time serving as a business operator and owner has certainly lent itself to my leadership skills. I've led teams of over 20 people, balanced budgets, and just looked out for the overall well-being of my staff and customers alike. But I really feel where my leadership style originated was as my time as a mountain and river guide and adventure athlete. Having that expedition mindset really plays into strong leadership, being able to mitigate risks, work as a team, and look out for the greater good of all in high risk situations. Really, I feel sets me up for being a strong and humble leader. And so I'm really grateful for all the experiences I've had in the outdoors, also leading groups of kids on multi-day expeditions in some pretty wild places, as well as also embarking on adventures throughout the world in my own endeavors.
Okay. What do you think the county should be doing about housing? Galena, you first.
Oh, what should we be doing? Well, we can be doing a lot of things, and the county is doing some great things in the name of developing more workforce housing. I'll just call out those projects right now because I think that it's important to recognize where we are right now and then how we move forward. Down at the sheriff's office, as well as at Deep Creek, there are 2 projects underway to develop workforce housing and on-call housing at the sheriff's office and workforce housing at the Deep Creek Department of Transportation site. And those are both partner projects that the county is undertaking, and it's going to create some really great housing direct to workforce and essential workers. The Pathfinder project up near San Bernardo is getting near the place where development can start to be undertaken, and that is the first project that the county will undertake on their own. I think moving forward, what we should really focus on is infill. I was excited to hear in the last planning commission that we're soon going to be looking at revisiting ADU regulations, accessory dwelling units, and figuring out how we can rework that and support our infrastructure throughout the county to potentially support more infill housing and ADUs, because I see that as being a huge opportunity, and it's not going to require a lot of development from the ground up on new sites. But I think we also need to explore new housing developments on sites where appropriate and get public input from the beginning to really work together with our community to find solutions. And I also think we need to continue to explore public-private partnerships. There's great opportunity there. I think I'm at time.
We have several groups of people that are kind of being stepped over with our housing opportunities. And one of those groups typically is the immigrant community. We have some significant housing needs that aren't truly being addressed because we're talking about workforce housing, and we try not to use that buzzword, affordable housing, right? Because like, what is affordable? But what's affordable to you may not be affordable to me. But we're talking about stepping over one of our most important workforce groups is the Latino community. I was in touch with the San Miguel Regional Housing Authority to try to tick some boxes because I didn't understand why there haven't been Section 8 vouchers put out in this county in 5 years. And that's a state situation where they're not actually going through and helping fortify those Section 8 housing vouchers. So when you're talking about people who can't afford, housing, like in Norwood, our little deed restricted stuff started at like $270,000 and goes up to $420,000. They're hard to qualify for. At first, we had our 24 units. The 2 bedrooms went very quickly. Commissioner Holstrom and I were there at the lottery, and it was pretty amazing watching the people's faces smile and light up knowing that they had a home, that they found something, they get to stay. But then the difficulty was getting the people to qualify for the larger scale homes with the AMI that was first set out. Being in a county where we're considered a resort community, we were able to go back to the table and negotiate the AMI from 120 to 160, which actually opened the door to those essential workers that we were trying to keep there in the first place. But it seems like it's, such a moving target all the time. We don't know where to develop, how to develop, and how fast we need to get it in there. And, construction truly puts a fire under you because next year's materials are going to be more expensive than they are this year. And how soon can we get it done? And who are we trying to keep here? How are we trying to facilitate that? And I believe that everyone here should have the opportunity to stay here.
Great. What will you do specifically to ensure long-term water reliability for current uses and growth in the face of drought and climate change?
Water. Okay. So again, back to the study that we're working on for Rights Mesa. Part of the PL 566 money, the federal money that's available, is whole watershed health. Recently, the San Miguel Water Conservancy District had the county take over its acre feet of in-stream that was in the San Miguel River. And that is going to remain in-stream flow. So then we have river sustainability there, and you have to take into consideration too, the riparian damage that's happening in our rivers is pretty significant. I think if we would actually pay attention to not storing it longer, but just storing it smarter by using pond liners and different types of things to allow the farmers or communities to hold the water a little longer before they released it, rather than letting everything go downstream immediately, would be helpful and more beneficial. It would help basically stabilize the ag community in different ways where they're not waiting for that second pond call at the end of the year. And, working on Blue Lake and Lewis Lake, sorry, we're wholly dependent on Mother Nature. Going back and retrofitting buildings and these types of things, there's new construction or remodels, that should be one of our priorities, is, going in and working on the fixtures and the infrastructure in the homes. Like Norwood, the redundant line going down 145 is done in PVC. So every time a semi drives down there, it's not bedded correctly. Its delivery is impacted. Town of Mountain Village, I'm very impressed by them, the way they've gone in and redone all their infrastructure. I mean, if I could write a check and post date it, that's really what I'd hope for my district. But just being conscientious, doing things smarter, paying attention, I think is a good place to start.
I mean, I want to let you keep talking, Candy. This is how I first met Candy, was talking about water issues in Norwood. And I appreciate everything I've learned from you, truly. I think that some low-hanging fruit is just encouraging our residents to use less water, and educating people on water conservation practices is somewhere we can start to, implement on a daily basis in our homes. Bolstering our infrastructure, especially on the West End, that project that we're referring to continually here, is really going to help build resiliency and reliability for the future. And another solution that we need to continually be brainstorming on is water storage in our basin and watershed. You know, how we can develop small scale water storage projects that's, you know, within the realm of legality for water law, I think is something we should really be looking at. Also on an agricultural level, I'm a soil nerd, but I have just been so excited to learn more and more about the PES program, Payment for Ecological Systems. And what this program is doing is incentivizing local producers, ranchers, and farmers to utilize regenerative agricultural practices to create soil health, which in turn creates water retention in the soil. And so when irrigation is coming through somebody's land, the water is staying on the land, ideally seeping into the water table, and it will then be recycled eventually. Or when the next water call comes, that land is so much more saturated, and it just creates health. It creates climate resiliency and water reliability for the future.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I actually have one additional question to add. As I outlined in the introduction, there are 3 members of the Board of County Commissioners residing in one of each of 3 districts, but making decisions together for the entire county. And we've heard you both make statements over the course of the evening about my district, other districts, this and that. So I was curious to hear kind of philosophically how you view the role in terms of you're coming from a district, but who do you represent and how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And the county commissioner position is an at-large position, meaning that all commissioners represent their district and all districts, and coming to some level of consensus or among the commissioners being able to represent the county at large is the goal. And so I feel that I'm really well suited for the job, given that I really do understand the entirety of the county and all the various economies and ways of life. And it's important to understand west to east and everything in between. You know, the county is almost 1,300 square miles, and it's a very diverse place with very diverse residents. And it's important to have a finger on all the pulses and be able to represent the county at large and make decisions that contribute to the greater good of the county. I think that each commissioner comes to the table representing their district and having a very good understanding of their constituents and the concerns and solutions. But ultimately, we all need to work together to make decisions that benefit the county together.
You can't have one without the other. If you want to have a long-term viable East End, you have to have a healthy and sustainable West End. And to do that, we can't be leaving one another behind or getting distracted with what's new and shiny when we have obligations to make sure that everyone has their opportunity. Everybody's entitled to a good education, a place to sleep, and food to eat. And again, you know, dealing with being on a municipality and seeing where we sit with the things that we need and our goals, I can also step back and see where the county is with their goals and the things they need and priority projects. The East End is has a good cash flow. It's moving forward. It's doing the things it sees fit in the town of Telluride and Mountain Village to be sustainable for itself. The county in large, I mean, there are other things that we need to be making sure that we're paying attention to as the West End, you know, like there's, you know, over 70% labor export comes out of the West End. You know, we export millions of dollars of agriculture every year. we are basically the bedroom community. And if there's no bedroom with lights on to come to, I mean, we kind of push ourselves out. I think conversations are incredibly necessary. I had my own thoughts about the Easton Master Plan until I actually had the opportunity to sit down with a local up here and talk about the similarities and the differences and bring them to my table so they could understand our similarities and our differences and figure out how we could build it better together so that we feel like it's being done with us and not to us across the county. And, we have incredible opportunity in this county. We have incredible resources. We're super small, but we are incredibly strong, and we set the bar for a lot of things. And I don't think that it's necessary to unzip the county at the Placerville turnoff. I think we can do things much better together as long as we understand one another and have an agreement that we're going to work together.
Thank you both for your thoughtful answers. Now you will each have 2 minutes for closing statements, and we will begin with Galena.
Okay, thank you. So first off, just thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate the engagement. As a fifth generation Coloradan and longtime San Miguel County resident, I understand where we have been and where we need to go to build a generative future for all. Over generations, San Miguel County has cultivated a robust regional economy driven by recreation, tourism, the arts, agriculture, and commerce. We are blessed with extraordinary natural resources and some of the world's most breathtaking landscapes. Wildlife habitats thrive, and our rangelands and soils remain healthy. Our dark skies are like nowhere else on Earth. It is important to understand our past to support a bright future. Our county has a history steeped in resilience, innovation, and vitality. We have always found a way forward by learning from both our failure and success. Every generation must take responsibility to maintain our infrastructure and contribute to our communities. This will serve the greater good while mending what is broken. The generations before us have laid the groundwork, and it is up to us to build on what has been provided for us. Our regional economy is at an inflection point. We can and will choose to hold up our communities, create opportunities for all residents, and foster transparency and open communication in government. As County Commissioner, I am dedicated to work towards consensus among residents and bring their voices to the table so we can continue to thrive. We can and will build resiliency by expanding housing opportunities for our workforce and all, strengthening our infrastructure through collaborative efforts, being stewards of the land, and giving a voice to all residents. On November 5th, every registered voter in our county has the chance to vote for District 3 County Commissioner. I am asking for your vote with the understanding that I owe this community my steadfast effort and commitment. Thank you all so much for creating the opportunity in this candidate forum.
When we look at our county, there's a lot to be proud of, but we still have a lot of work to do. We are only as strong as the most vulnerable in our communities are. And if we don't step in and start working towards making sure that everyone has a sustainable opportunity in this community, we're not serving our purpose. There are a lot of opportunities for the county and the county commissioners and other regional organizations to step in and figure out how we're going to make sure that the residents here feel like this is always their home, that they're not having to work somewhere and then play somewhere else because they're not welcome. And, the exacerbated costs that we're running into, not just regionally, but as a nation, that takes a toll on people. So they embrace their culture. They go back to their heritage. But I want to make sure that as we're functioning in this county, that that's something they have the opportunity to do. There are different, lifestyles and opportunities on the East End than there are on the West End. And I want to make sure that everyone still has the right to access both. Agriculture is huge in this community. Mining's still a big part of it. The resorts and the economy driven by the mountain are our bread and butter. It's kind of our heartbeat. And at this point in time, I want to make sure that when the county is sitting down and having these conversations, that we're not hyper focusing on one space and forgetting the other's place. I keep wanting to go back to the water and to the vulnerabilities in the community. I don't think ever once I've heard too many times it being said that Egner has no water system. They all haul water. We're talking about the vulnerable in the community. That's the part of it. There's no reason we can't all catch up. There's no reason it can't all be a sustainable, mindful, collaborative place for us all. When we go to the polls November 5th, you have Miss Galena, who's very lovely, who's asked for your vote. And I'm also asking for your vote. But I'm going to tell you what, we have a great ticket. You can't lose either way. And thank you very much for giving us the time and the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you to our candidates and presenters this evening. A huge thank you to Valentina and to Alexa and Vito. Good job. And thank you all for attending and tuning in. Before we wrap up, I want to mention that voters in the Norwood School District and the Norwood Fire Protection District will also have important funding measures appearing on their ballots. Although we were not able to cover these tonight, we encourage voters to read up on measures 5B and 7A. Ballots have been mailed to all active registered voters, and drop boxes will be open beginning tomorrow. Early voting will begin on the 21st. Please visit the county's elections department webpage for more information. The PWC will also be hosting a Blue Book party a week from tonight on the 22nd at Whittier from 5:30 to 7:30. Governing council members will be available to go through pros and cons of the state ballot measures and chat about all things politics. In addition to the presidential race, there are 14 questions appearing on Coloradans' ballots this year, as well as the local ones we touched on tonight. So come and have a drink and get ready to vote. We would love to see you there. Good night.